My name is Alexander Gulyaev and I welcome you to my channel, where I share the most relevant and useful information for everyone interested in real estate investments. Today's topic is particularly important as it addresses the purchase of real estate on one of the most popular resort islands in the world, the island of Bali. So today we will discuss what land rental in Bali entails. What are the specifics of this transaction for foreign citizens? What you need to know about concepts such as leasehold and freehold, and what risks may arise from them. We will analyze why can't foreigners fully own land in Bali, and what legal mechanisms are available to bypass these restrictions. And most importantly, how to secure your investments and avoid being deceived. This episode will be especially useful for potential investors, so I recommend watching until the end. For knowledge of the intricacies and nuances can not only save you money, but also ensure a stable future for the property you have acquired in Bali. One of the first questions that arises for foreign investors is, can't I own land in Bali? This question arises for a reason, as many who wish to purchase real estate on the island face quite strict legal restrictions. So, why can't foreigners own land in Bali? To understand this, it is necessary to refer to the history of Indonesia and the specifics of its legislation. Indonesia, as an independent state, emerged in 1945 after the end of the Japanese occupation and the overthrow of more than 300 years of colonial rule by the Netherlands. Although the Netherlands left a rich cultural and legal heritage, the land legislation in Indonesia significantly differs from Western systems. This is related to the fact that despite the influence of colonizers, Indonesia has preserved many traditional and local legal norms that historically regulated land use. While in Europe and America private land ownership has been a fundamental principle, in Indonesia, collective and state ownership predominated, which is reflected in its unique land legislation. The Indonesian constitution proclaims that land, water, and natural resources are public assets managed by the state in the interests of the people. As a result, Indonesian land legislation is significantly different from Western models, which explains the difficulties for foreign citizens wishing to acquire land on the island. According to the Land Rights Law of 1960, foreigners are not allowed to own land in Indonesia. This was done to prevent foreign dominance in land ownership issues and to protect the interests of the Indonesian population. Thus, any foreign citizen interested in acquiring real estate in Bali is forced to use alternative legal schemes, such as land rental. These restrictions may seem complex and daunting, but let's take a look at how alternative schemes work and how reliable they are for foreign investors. When it comes to acquiring real estate in Bali, one of the most common and safe options for foreign citizens is to enter into a land lease agreement, known as leasehold. Leasehold is a land rental agreement for a specified period, which usually lasts from 25 to 30 years with the possibility of extension. Under this agreement, the tenant receives the right to use the land plot and to construct buildings on it. But the land itself remains owned by the owner, who is usually a citizen of Indonesia. At first glance, it may seem that renting land is a less attractive option than full ownership. However, this is far from the case. Let's examine the advantages and disadvantages of leasehold to understand how suitable it is for you as an investor. The cost of land in Bali has significantly increased over the past few years, especially in popular tourist areas. Leasehold allows for significant savings, compared to options requiring full ownership. This is especially relevant if you plan to invest in real estate for rental or subsequent sale. Indonesian legislation provides significant protection for the rights of tenants, especially in the case of long-term contracts, for example. Even if the land is transferred to another owner, your rights to the lease will remain in effect until the end of the contract. The main disadvantage of leasehold is the limited duration of the contract, with the standard lease term ranging from 20 to 30 years, with the possibility of extension for an additional 20-30 years depending on the terms of the contract. However, after this period, the rights to the land will revert to the owner, which may create problems for long-term investors, especially if you plan to leave the property as an inheritance. Extending a lease agreement can become a challenging task, especially if the landowner is involved, or he or his heirs decide to change the terms or raise the rent. This adds an element of uncertainty that needs to be taken into account when planning investments. In the case of reselling property that is under a leasehold agreement, the new buyer will also be limited by the terms of the lease agreement. This may reduce the attractiveness of the property for potential buyers and decrease its market value. Nevertheless, despite the mentioned drawbacks, leasehold remains one of the most popular options for foreign investors in Bali. It allows for legal and relatively safe property ownership, minimizing legal risks. Now let's talk about another important concept, freehold. This concept is of the greatest interest to investors, as freehold means full ownership of the land. However, there are nuances that need to be considered. Freehold implies that you, as the property owner, you have complete control over the land and can dispose of it at your discretion. sell, transfer by inheritance, lease, and so on. However, according to Indonesian legislation, foreigners cannot own land in Bali under freehold rights directly. However, there are certain legal mechanisms that allow foreign citizens to obtain indirect ownership of land. These mechanisms include the establishment of a company with foreign capital, PTPMA. PTPMA is a company that is registered in Indonesia, in which foreigners can own shares. Through such a company, it is possible to acquire land on freehold terms. It is important to note that even with freehold ownership, there are restrictions regarding land leasing. For foreigners, for those owning land through PTPMA, an equivalent to freehold is effectively available, but with a time limitation of up to 30 years, with the possibility of extension. The use of a nominal owner, the nominal owner. This is an Indonesian citizen on whom the right of ownership of the land is formally registered, but in fact, it acts in the interest of the foreign investor. This method is widely used, but it carries significant risks. Since the rights of the nominal owner are legally protected, while the rights of the foreign investor are not, this may lead to a loss of control over the land in the event of a conflict. The third option is mixed schemes. In some cases, it is possible to combine leasehold and freehold. For example, when a foreign investor acquires freehold through PTPMA and then enters into a leasehold agreement with themselves to maximize property rights, it is important to remember that the use of such schemes requires thorough legal verification and consultation with experienced specialists. Incorrect documentation or errors in the contract can lead to the loss of ownership rights or to significant financial liability as a result. Therefore, when considering the purchase of property in Bali, in order to obtain freehold, it is important to work with qualified lawyers and consultants who have a good understanding of local Indonesian legislation and can ensure the protection of your interests. This is especially relevant for foreign investors, as the legal mechanisms can be complex and require an individual approach. In addition, possible changes in the legislation should be taken into account that may affect property rights. Constant monitoring of the legal environment and timely updating of documents will help avoid undesirable consequences and protect your investments. Ultimately, the choice of strategy for obtaining freehold in Bali should be based on a thorough analysis of all available options, risk assessments and legal support, which will allow you to effectively manage your assets and minimize potential risks. Freehold still provides more rights and flexibility in managing property than leasehold. While leasehold is essentially a lease of the land, the owner of freehold has more control over the land, can independently make decisions regarding the construction and use of the property, without the need to obtain additional approvals from the tenant. However, it is important to remember that all legislative restrictions and risks associated with this type of land ownership must be taken into account. It is also worth noting that freehold is generally more expensive than leasehold, which is related to the fact that freehold provides more rights to own and use the land, making it more attractive and in demand. When purchasing freehold, you acquire not only the rights to use the land, but also the land itself, which significantly increases the cost compared to renting. Additionally, extra expenses may include taxes and fees related to full ownership of the land. These nuances are often overlooked, but they are important for understanding the full picture and properly managing your investments. As an investor, you must possess complete and accurate information necessary for making informed decisions. When purchasing property in Bali, it is important to raise the risks associated with leasehold, on which your property will be built. Let's consider how to minimize these risks and protect your investments. Thorough legal check, due diligence. Before purchasing real estate, it is important to conduct a thorough legal check to ensure that everything is done correctly and in accordance with local legislation. Verification of ownership rights. Ensure that the developer has the legal right to lease the land. Check all documents and their compliance with Indonesian legislation. Analysis of leasehold conditions. Carefully review the terms of the leasehold agreement that the developer will use for your property. Check the leasehold terms, the possibility of extension, and the conditions for early termination. Check for the absence of encumbrances. Ensure that there are no encumbrances on the land or debts that may affect your right to use the property. The legal check should be conducted by an experienced lawyer who specializes in Indonesian land law. Choosing a reliable developer or agency is critical for the successful purchase and management of the property. History and reputation. Research the developer's reputation. Check reviews, recommendations, and examples of successful projects to ensure their reliability. Transparent relationships. Ensure that all conditions and relationships with the developer are formalized in writing. This will help avoid misunderstandings and protect your interests. Extending the lease term. If your leasehold agreement is coming to an end and you plan to retain the property, start negotiations for the leasehold extension as early as possible. This will help avoid unexpected changes in condition or refusal to extend. Conclusion of a preliminary agreement. Consider the possibility of entering into a preliminary agreement for the leasehold extension several years before the current contract expires, especially if the land is owned by the developer on freehold rights. Who is negotiating? If the developer owns the land on freehold rights, negotiations for the leasehold extension will be conducted with them, which frees you from the need to communicate directly with the landowners. Support in negotiations. If the land is under leasehold, the developer will also negotiate on your behalf, providing professional support and minimizing the risks of changes to the leasehold conditions. Development of an exit strategy. Think in advance about possible exit strategies for the investment project. Analyze market conditions, periodically assess the market conditions, to be prepared for a possible sale or assignment of leasehold rights. Conclusion of a contract under the terms of assignment. Consider including a clause in the contract regarding the assignment of rights to third parties for flexibility in managing the property. As you may have noticed, risk management in leasehold land on Bali. It is a complex and multi-stage process that requires a deep understanding of local legislation, careful analysis, and thorough preparation to mitigate all risks and protect your investments. It requires a lot of time, resources, and experience, but there is a way to make it easier and more reliable. At Legion Real Estate Agency, we understand all the nuances of the real estate market in Bali and offer you our services so that you can focus on what really matters to you. My real estate agency is located directly in Bali, which allows us to respond quickly to any changes in legislation or in the real estate market. We are always aware of all the innovations and can quickly adapt our strategies to the new conditions. We collaborate with verified legal contractors who have been operating on the island for over 10 years. This guarantees that all your transactions will be accompanied by experienced specialists who are familiar with local specifics. In our database of properties, there are only reliable developers whose land documents we have already verified. You can be confident that you are acquiring real estate with a clean legal history. For each client, we conduct thorough due diligence so that you can invest with peace of mind, knowing that all legal aspects have been taken into account. We not only help you purchase real estate profitably, but we also ensure its resale in the future. If you decide to exit the project, over the past year and a half, we have been entrusted with investments totaling more than $50 million, and we have successfully sold over 350 real estate properties in Bali. Contact us today and we will provide you with a free consultation. With us, you will not only be able to invest profitably in real estate in Bali, but you will also be confident in the legal purity of your property. Legion Real Estate, your reliable partner in the real estate market in Bali. Click the link below the video and submit a request for a free consultation.